Okay, a very warm welcome to our Miracle Monday calls. My name is Reverend Lisa Windsor, and I'm so happy that you're joining us at Modern Miracles Academy. I love our Monday calls. They're free calls. You can always invite a friend, bring people in that are curious about A Course in Miracles, interested, walking alongside you, your mighty companions with A Course in Miracles. Everyone is welcome. And what I love if you're able to make it on the live call is that after we finish the recording, there is some time to ask questions, to share what stood out for you on the call, and just to engage and connect with the community. So always encouraging you to come and meet us live. And of course, if you're listening to the recording, we're just so happy that you're joined with us. And there is that present moment connection. Like we are joined right now in spirit. That's how it works. So I always trust the perfect timing of when we listen to these kinds of classes and just let the thoughts of God wash over and through our minds. Okay, it's so the most beautiful soul care, self care we can do is to let the thoughts of God wash through our minds. Okay. So let's begin with an opening prayer. And if possible, I encourage you to rest your eyes closed if you can, and just start to draw your awareness, your focus inward. Take a nice deep breath, inhaling peace, and just exhaling any tension you're feeling. Let's inhale some love and let go of any anxiety. Just starting to settle, relaxing the physical body, softening around our emotions, calling in lots of gentleness. It's so beautiful that gentleness is actually a characteristic of God's teachers. And so let us all cultivate gentleness today as we join gentleness towards ourselves and each other. Calling in lots of compassion as well as we come together to open our hearts and minds to our inner teachers, the presence of God, the voice for God. Let's together welcome Holy Spirit and Jesus to take the lead in our minds. Together we will step back and let them lead the way. We do not know the way without them. Just allowing Holy Spirit to light our path, just illuminate our path so beautifully, and inviting Jesus to take our hand. Yeah, he walks along with us, always the director. He knows the way. He navigates the route. And we follow gently, lovingly, joyfully, gratefully, with lots of gratitude. Let's take one more deep breath. And just know that you are loved beyond measure and you are totally worthy of peace. Just welcoming a beautiful heart scrub and a beautiful purification of the mind as we join together today. Mm. Just remembering that we are not alone. So in the lead, ever so gently, with that compassion and gentleness in place, we can allow our eyes to open. We're just going to hold in this prayer and connection as we do so. Hmm. It's so beautiful because when our eyes are closed and we're in that deep prayer, Jesus is teaching us. He said, now open your eyes and be in that deep prayer. He's like, there's no difference between eyes closed and eyes open on this journey. And actually, that's why even in our workbook lessons, as we go along, some of the lessons are done with eyes closed. Sometimes, even in the lessons, we close our eyes for part of the lesson and open our eyes for part of the lesson. He's teaching us this is a constant prayer. God is with us in constancy and consistency. It's just so beautiful. We're so held. So, oh, we're just welcoming in the the winter kind of season right now, coming into the Christmas season. And, when we began the journey through the text a little while ago, Jesus came to the forefront. He came to the forefront and said, let me be your guide through this text. This is his course. This is his course. So it's interesting. We're heading into chapter 3 today. We're just starting chapter 3. And my sense is that we're going to cover two sections today. I do not want to rush through these sections because Jesus is with us on like his story is kind of woven into this part. We're going to talk a little bit about the crucifixion. We're going to talk a little bit about the resurrection. We're going to talk a little bit about um, the Christian influence, right? And so he is definitely front and center as we are coming into our class today. Now, I want you to know, like, this course is a universal curriculum, even though it has Christian terminology and it has connections to Christianity because Jesus is our guide, right? But just so you know, I have no Christian background. It's kind of an interesting thing for me. I have never read the Bible. I've really never been to church. I grew up, I can't even say that I was atheist growing up because we never even talked about God. It wasn't like I don't believe in God. It was just like it was not a subject that came up that was welcomed. So I never really thought about it, to be honest. No one in my community or around me went to church. I didn't know. I didn't know about that. It was just like not in my bubble in my experience. And so when spirituality came in, and especially when the course came in, I was very uncomfortable with the idea of Jesus. I was very uncomfortable with the Christian terminology, mostly because I had no background with it. I'd have no history with it. I had no connection to it. That's how I felt. So it was so funny I don't know if you don't know, me journeying with you through the text is kind of a big deal for me. It's not, I'm not like it took this long for me to journey with you through the text. Okay. So when we come to sections like this, where Jesus wants to talk about the crucifixion and the resurrection and the Christian ideas, I'm like, oh boy, okay, Jesus, you're gonna have to walk me through this because I'm not coming from a from a place of like, knowing what I'm talking about, basically. So bear with me through it. And, in the discussion at the end, you may have some things to bring in, which would be great if you have a background in that. I will say, though, for me, I do feel grateful because I have encountered a lot of people with religious backgrounds that, in their own right, have a lot of undoing around all of that. And I will say in this lifetime, I don't have undoing around it because I didn't have it done. There was no doing in the beginning. But I do want to validate that that is a big experience for a lot of people that come to the course, that they come up against the beliefs that they were taught about Christianity, about Catholicism, about different things, about their own, past religions. And I'm just joined with you in that, in holding space for whatever undoing kind of needs to happen with that, whatever healing is kind of coming through. Okay, so let's begin. We're starting chapter 3. Chapter 3 is called The Innocent Perception, okay? And section 1 is called Atonement Without Sacrifice. Now, if you're kind of trying to follow along, although I jump around a little bit, I do the Foundation for Inner Peace version of A Course in Miracles. That's where it's published by. So if you're ever referring back, that's where I'm reading from, okay? So It's kind of interesting because the chapter is called The Innocent Perception. But what I feel is that as those of us that we've all been conditioned in this world with the ego, we really hold a guilty perception, right? So this is called the innocent perception. But I think, oh gosh, like the way that we grow up, the way that we're conditioned in the world, the way that the ego works in the mind is the guilty perception. Okay, so we're kind of bringing that in. He's going to bring us to the innocent perception, but we remember that our perception is seen through a lens of guilt when we're with the ego. Okay, so I love the way Jesus starts this. He starts it as if we're in the middle of a chapter, but it's really the beginning. He says, a further point must be perfectly clear before any residual fear still associated with miracles can disappear. Okay, I'm going to say that again. A further point must be perfectly clear before any residual fear still associated with miracles can disappear. The crucifixion did not establish the atonement. The resurrection did. Many sincere Christians have misunderstood this. Okay, so we're just talking about the Christian perspective on this. Okay, he says, if the crucifixion is seen from an upside down point of view, it does appear as if God permitted and even encouraged one of his sons to suffer because he was good. Jesus says this particularly unfortunate interpretation, which arose out of projection, has led many people to be bitterly afraid of God. Okay, so I also want to say this to you. Even though I wasn't raised in Christianity, the same deep-rooted beliefs in punishment, in sacrifice, in what happened with the crucifixion and resurrection are still they're permeated in all of our minds because it's the ego thought system, right? So that's the example kind of that we're using about the story of the crucifixion and the resurrection. But I'm not apart from that. I have the same rooted beliefs. I still grew up in the same culture that would like see through that lens, even if it wasn't being used specifically with those symbols. Okay, so again, Jesus in the Course, he wants us to unwind from our fixation on the crucifixion, right? That's not what established the atonement. He wants us to place our attention on the resurrection. Okay? The resurrection, the life, the truth, the eternal. That's where in A Course in Miracles we are rerouting our attention. We know if you think about the crucifixion and how like much of a crazy distraction it would be for us to like how do we even tear our attention away from something like that, right? Of course we're fixated on something like that. He's asking us, he's saying that's not what established the correction, that's not what established the healing, that's not how we're saved to fixate on the crucifixion. You're missing the point. He's saying you're missing the point. You need to look to the resurrection. Okay, and of course, so what he's saying, and he's saying it with kindness, right? He says, many sincere Christians have misunderstood this. Now, here in A Course in Miracles is one of the places where it diverts really, really like, if it's talking about, he's saying it's an upside down perspective, right? Upside down and backwards to the truth. And he's trying to flip the perspective and the perception of it right side up in A Course in Miracles. So he is saying it is a misperception, the way that Christians are looking at this. So he says here, if the crucifixion is seen from an upside down point of view, so that's what he's saying. We've always seen it. That's what we've been taught in the world and through the religious lens, that it's been an upside down point of view. It does appear as if God permitted and even encouraged one of his sons to suffer because he was good. And again, Jesus is saying this particularly unfortunate, he calls it an unfortunate misinterpretation, right? An unfortunate interpretation which arose out of projection has led many people to be bitterly afraid of God. I want to just take a moment here. If we believe, just think about this, because sometimes we actually have to think about this, right? If we believe that God himself permitted and even encouraged, right, one of his sons to suffer because he was good, that would lead us to be bitterly afraid of God. If we believe that God permitted and encouraged Jesus' crucifixion, his death, his suffering, that would make us afraid of God. We would be afraid of God. Can you link that together? The fear we would have of God in believing that belief? Okay. He then calls it an anti-religious concept. Jesus is saying it's an anti-religious concept. He says such anti-religious concepts enter into many religions. There's tons of anti-religious concepts in many religions, right? Why? Because the ego has taken a hold and then it's seen through an ego lens. It inverts what's truly religious and it becomes anti-religious. Then he asks us this. Yet the real Christian should pause and ask. I love this. I was like, we should all pause and ask, right? We should all pause and ask. How could this be, right? Is it likely that God himself would be capable of this kind of thinking? And I love how Jesus points to the mind, would be capable of this kind of thinking, which his own words have clearly stated is unworthy of his son. Is this how God thinks? To punish, to make his son suffer because he was good, because he was innocent? This is important because this is where we have wrong perception and wrong perspective on our relationship with God, and it needs healing. It needs healing in all of our minds. Okay? So a little down, he says, persecution frequently results in an attempt to justify, he's got that in quotes, the terrible misperception that God himself persecuted his own son on behalf of salvation. Okay, I'm going to say that again. And we're walking through it slowly, right? Because we want to see what is the perspective that we would hold about God that would make us bitterly afraid of him. Okay, the idea of persecution, because Jesus was persecuted. That's the perspective we have, that Jesus was persecuted on the cross. Persecution frequently results in an attempt to justify the terrible misperception. Jesus calls this a terrible misperception. A terrible misperception of God, that we would think that he persecuted his son, right? The terrible misperception that God himself persecuted his own son on behalf of salvation. So that the way that we are saved is that God persecuted his son. I'm going to say that again because Jesus says it's a terrible misperception of God. You guys, God is perfect love. A Course in Miracles teaches that. But if we don't look at the inherent cultural beliefs and the conditioned beliefs we have about God and about what he's done in the story of Jesus and the Christian story, I didn't grow up with Christianity. This is in me too. It plays out in all kinds of different ways. The belief in persecution, the belief in punishment. Then Jesus says, the very words are meaningless. The very words that God himself persecuted his own son on behalf of salvation, he says, those are meaningless words. They're meaningless because those words are not the word that is not the word of God. That is not the word of love. They're meaningless. That is an ego misperception. And we're learning to discern right-mindedness from wrong-mindedness, right? We're learning to discern that. If we looked at that, we could say, that's not a loving statement. That's not a loving thought. But here's what Jesus says about it. He says, it has been particularly difficult to overcome this because Although the error itself is no harder to correct than any other, that misperception is no harder to correct than any other, many have been unwilling to give it up in view of its prominent value as a defense. Okay, so if we hold this belief, if we hold this perception, we get to have a defense that says, I can punish, I can persecute, and I'm justified in it. I can project my guilt, I can punish, I can persecute, and I'm justified in it. Here's Jesus's example. In milder forms, a parent says, this hurts me more than it hurts you, and feels exonerated in beating a child. The parent says, this hurts me more than it hurts you, and feels exonerated in beating a child. Okay? Can you believe our Father really thinks this way? I love this question. Do we even question this? Can you believe that God would think this way? It is so essential, he says, that all such thinking be dispelled, that we must be sure that nothing of this kind remains in your mind, that none of this kind of thinking remains in your mind. Jesus tells us, I was not punished. He says punished in brackets because he wasn't punished. He wasn't punished. God did not punish him. That's not what happened. I was not punished because you were bad. He just says it outright. There's the upside down perception of it. He was punished because we were bad. He was punished for our sins. Jesus, this is him. I was not punished because you were bad. The holy benign lesson the atonement teaches is lost if it is tainted with this kind of distortion in any form. Jesus was teaching us. He taught us in the lesson of the crucifixion that he cannot be persecuted and he cannot be punished and he cannot die. That's what he taught us in the crucifixion. He was not punished. He was teaching us that who we are cannot be persecuted, punished, or die. He was not that body. That's not him. That's not him. There was no punishment from God. It was the lesson that he came to teach us, that no matter what, you cannot punish, persecute, hurt the Son of God. You cannot kill the Son of God. Okay? He taught us, right? He taught us our innocence, right? He taught us, he taught it. That's what he was saying. We cannot be separate. We cannot be these separate bodies. Okay. And just to like kind of emphasize a little bit more about the thought that we have about this, it's this thought that this belief that we hold that punishment needs correction, or if there's a wrongdoing, it needs punishment to correct it. So we need punishment to correct wrongdoings. That's like the belief in the world. And he's like, we have to give all that misthought up, all of that misthought up. We totally lose sight of innocence when we do that. Okay. And I'm going to say more about that as we go. Okay. This line, God does not believe in retribution. Okay. Retribution means that wrongdoing must be repaid with punishment. Retribution means that wrongdoing, any kind of wrongdoing, must be repaid with punishment. So you do something wrong, you get punished for it. That's how you get it. That's how it's corrected. That's how it balances out. Okay. Another way to say that is that someone must pay. If there's a wrongdoing, someone must pay. And it has to be balanced out with suffering. So Jesus is telling us God does not believe in retribution. Okay, again, which means a wrongdoing must be repaid with punishment. He says his mind does not create that way. He does not hold your evil deeds against you. And evil is in quotes because there are no evil deeds in truth, but he says he does not hold your evil deeds against you. Is it likely that he would hold them against me? He's asking us to think about this. If God does not mind, if God's mind does not create that way, it doesn't hold our evil deeds against us and then try and punish us for it. He doesn't believe in sin, okay? Would he hold that against Jesus? Okay? Jesus tells us, be very sure that you recognize how utterly impossible this assumption is and how entirely it arises from projection. So, how did we get here? How did we get into this place where we are seeing God as a punishing God, right? This is through projection. We have the ego thought system and the guilt of the separation in the mind, and we project it onto God. And now God becomes like the ego God, where it's a punishing God, and the God that judges us and sees us sinful, right? It's that's not God in truth. That's not our source in truth. And it's just so great. Like for today, maybe this is the first time where we've just even questioned, even questioning, does God punish us? Like that's a great question. Just is is does God punish us? Is that the lens he looks through? Does he judge us? That's a great question. Does God judge us? Okay, so I want to link this because it says God does not believe in retribution, and God also does not believe in sacrifice. Okay, so the idea of sacrifice is the belief that something of value must be given up or lost or suffered to gain something else, right? It's the price of love. You sacrifice, there's a price, there's a cost to love. That something must be given up, lost, suffered, so that we can have something else, that we have to sacrifice something, right? And we that belief in sacrifice is very central to the ego thought system. Okay? All of these beliefs are that we're talking about, the ones that we've projected onto God, they're central to the ego thought system. So sacrifice, Jesus says, is a notion totally unknown to God. If sacrifice is a notion totally unknown to God, we can already see Jesus on the cross, and we would have to give up the story that was sacrificial. If sacrifice is a notion totally unknown to God, that story doesn't hold. It doesn't hold. Okay? It arises, he says, the idea of sacrifice arises solely from fear. And he says, and frightened people can be vicious. Okay, of course, right? Because we're frightened that punishment, that we're deserving of that. If we think that Jesus is, going to be sacrificed for that, we have our own fear of punishment of God. And that goes on so deep in our psyche that we believe that we are going to be punished by God. And that we constantly feel like we better sacrifice something to get to avoid the punishment. Okay, so this kind of relates to it in terms of Jesus, right? So he says, I have been correctly referred to as the Lamb of God who taketh away the sins of the world. That's in quotes. But those who represent the lamb as blood-stained do not understand the meaning of the symbol. So as soon as we take he said the symbol of the lamb, perfect. But if you look through a lens and see the lamb as bloodstained, what does that mean? It means the little innocent lamb was sacrificed, right? That Jesus is the little lamb and the lamb was bloodstained. It's sacrificed. It suffered and it bled, right? He had to shed his blood and suffer. That was the sacrifice. So he wants to shift, he's shifting the symbol. He's saying, that's not how I want you to see the symbol of the lamb. Correctly understood, it is a very simple symbol that speaks of my innocence. The lion and the lamb lying down together symbolize that strength and innocence are not in conflict, but naturally live in peace. So let's just take a moment and think of the symbol of the lamb and think of the symbol of the lion lying down together in peace. Innocence and strength together. Innocence and strength together. Okay? Jesus says, a pure mind does not confuse destruction with innocence because it associates innocence with strength and not weakness. So when we look at Jesus on the cross and we see it through the idea that he's being persecuted, we are equating strength with this or innocence with destruction. We're putting innocence and destruction together if we're seeing it through the lens of him being persecuted. If we look at him as the symbol of innocence and we see him through the lens of the resurrection and the strength of God, that he was unharmed, that he was eternal, that love could not be altered by that, we see the innocence and the strength together, right? Innocence always goes with strength. Innocence always goes with love. Innocence is how God created us. And Jesus says this in the next line. Innocence is incapable of sacrificing anything because the innocent mind has everything. It has all the gifts of God. It knows God and strives only to protect its wholeness. That's all it does. It has everything and it strives only to protect its wholeness. Jesus tells us the atonement is entirely unambiguous, meaning it is perfectly clear because it exists only in the light. And the innocence exists only in the light. The rest is illusion and must be dispelled. The rest is illusion. It must be dispelled. Okay? So a little bit more about the atonement. He says, the atonement itself radiates nothing but truth. It therefore epitomizes harmlessness and sheds only blessing. It could not do this if it arose from anything but perfect innocence. Innocence is wisdom because it is unaware of evil and evil does not exist. It is, however, perfectly aware of everything that is true. The resurrection demonstrated that nothing can destroy truth. The resurrection demonstrated that nothing can destroy the truth. Nothing can destroy truth. Nothing can destroy what is true and real and created by God. That was the lesson. That's what established the atonement. And the atonement is only in the light. Of course, the atonement has nothing to do with the crucifixion. It's all about the resurrection and the truth. So a little bit more about innocence. The innocence of God is the true state of the mind of his son. So that's something that you can actually start to kind of connect with, is that when your mind is in a state of innocence, where you're looking and feeling the innocent perception, you know you're in alignment with spirit. Okay? In this state, your mind knows God, for God is not symbolic, he is fact. In that state, you know him. Not symbolically, he is fact. Knowing his son as he is, you realize that the atonement, not sacrifice, is the only appropriate gift for God's altar. where nothing except perfection belongs. So let's just go over that sentence because I think it's important, okay? If we think of the altar, right? If we think of the altar at the center, what we want to place on the altar, the ego has wanted us to sacrifice and place the sacrificial symbols on the altar. That's what the ego would have us do. It would have us place those on the altar, right? And then it says, when you're seeing through the lens of innocence, the only appropriate gift for God's altars is the atonement, is the correction, is the truth of our innocence. Nothing except perfection belongs. So I just want you to think about, what do we want to place on God's altar? Right? What is worthy of God's altar? That is true. God's gifts, his blessings, the Christ, all of the things, only the truth is true. That is the only thing worthy of his altar, the love. The ego tries to blend it and bring the sacrifice and the blood and the suffering and the punishment and the guilt. Doesn't mean anything. It doesn't land there. I mean, bring it there, it'll disappear. That's forgiveness. At the end of the day, at the end of the day, that's kind of what happens, is finally we give it up. We give it up and it disappears. In this course, it tells us the only thing you're going to lose is the pain and suffering. That's it. That's the only thing you'll lose along the way. Okay. That was section 1. And I just want to I'm going to do a little bit on section 2. And then what I'm bringing into section 2 is the innocence. That seems to be a theme in part 2, okay? Which is called miracles as true perception. This goes a little bit into really around the mind training he's establishing in this course. He says, I have stated that the basic concepts referred to in this course are not matters of degree. Certain fundamental concepts cannot be understood in terms of opposites. It is impossible to conceive of light and darkness or everything and nothing as joint possibilities. They are all true or all false. It is essential that you realize your thinking will be erratic until a firm commitment to one or the other is made. But listen to what he says here. A firm commitment to darkness or nothing, however, is totally impossible. It's impossible. Okay? No one has ever lived who has not experienced some light and something. No one, therefore, is able to deny truth totally, even if he thinks he can. So there's a safety switch involved here, right? He's saying you need to make a total commitment ultimately to what is real and true. The light, the everything, God, the innocence, all of that, a total commitment to that. If you try to commit to the darkness, it's impossible to fully commit to it ever. It's just impossible. And so there's no full commitment to the darkness because no one has ever lived that has not been connected to the light. We're still all connected to the light. You can't lose God. You can't lose the light. You can't lose the spark. He tells us innocence is not a partial attribute. It is not real until it is total. So this is what I'm saying about innocence. He wants it to become a viewpoint. He wants innocence to become a viewpoint. Think about that for a moment. A lens that we see through. Innocence is a viewpoint with universal application. Then it becomes wisdom. So, to kind of contrast it, we'll think of ourselves as, well, I have some innocence in me, or I'm a little bit guilty. Maybe I'm not fully guilty, but I'm a little bit guilty. I'm a little bit innocent. None of that. That's the idea of partial. When we talk about a viewpoint of innocence, we are looking fully and wholly through a perception of right-mindedness and through the light. Wholly innocent, not partially. Wholly innocent, not partially. The ego is all about compromise about that. He says, yeah, you're innocent, but you have done a lot of things that make you guilty too. He wants us to hold both. That's the erratic mindset, right? He says you eventually have to decide on one. You can't decide on darkness. It's never going to work because no one can do that. So eventually you're going to come to commit fully to the viewpoint of full and complete innocence. He says innocence or true perception means that you never misperceive and always see truly. More simply, it means that you never see what does not exist and always see what does. And now you're looking through the lens of right-mindedness. You're looking through the lens of spiritual vision, and you're seeing past all the illusions to the Christ, to the truth, to the light. And you're not fooled by any of it. It's like you've got the spiritual sight. He says, when you lack confidence in what someone will do, you are attesting to your belief that he is not in his right mind. This is hardly a miracle-based frame of reference. So he's saying, when you're judging someone, when you're seeing them in their wrong mind, you are in an ego framework. You're looking through the ego lens. The miracle perceives everything as it is. If nothing but the truth exists, right? If nothing but love exists and the truth exists, right-minded seeing cannot see anything but perfection. I have said that only what God creates or what you create with the same will has any real existence. This then is all the innocent can see. They do not suffer from distorted perception. That's the journey we're heading down. Now, I just want you to, we're going to use a quick example, okay? Quick example is Jesus on the cross. He did not have distorted perception on the cross. He had perfect innocent, he was looking fully through the lens of innocence. That's when he could say, Father, forgive them for they know not what they do, right? He's looking through a lens to the Christ in them, seeing the innocence, remembering that. That's what it is to look through that lens. You do not have distorted vision. You do not have distorted vision anymore. Or distorted perception is maybe another way to say it. Okay, so just a couple other things. I love this because I'm like, okay, well, where do we go from here? Jesus tells us nothing can prevail against a son of God who commends his spirit into the hands of his Father. Can we please take a moment and commend our spirits into the hands of God? Into the hands of God, the loving God, the perfect God, the God that has created us loving and innocent and perfect, right? That is the thing. He says, you're safe when you commend your spirit into God's hands. By doing this, the mind awakens from its sleep and remembers its creator. So we are surrendering, we are releasing ourselves into the care of God. He says all separation will disappear. And then that's what it is to be in the sense of the truly innocent. That's what Jesus did. You know, he commended his spirit totally to God. And then he was truly innocent. He was in an experience and a perception and a demonstration of true innocence. He was innocent and he saw our innocence. Okay? Now Jesus is just describing the purely innocent, the truly innocent, which was him, right? Their hearts are pure. The innocent defend true perception instead of defending themselves against it. Understanding the lesson of the atonement, they are without the wish to attack, and therefore they see truly. He had no wish to attack. He was just in forgiveness. He was just in the whole, right? He knew who he was. He remembered who he was, and he remembered who we were. He tells us the way to correct distortions is to withdraw your faith in them and invest it only in what is true. Jesus withdrew his attention and his faith from the distortions of the world and he placed all of his investment in God. And that is what his invitation is to us in this course. He's asking us to do the same. He's asking us withdraw your attention from the illusion. We can say withdraw your attention from the crucifixion. Like kind of like he's like, and place it on the resurrection. Place it on what is true. He tells us you cannot make untruth true. If you are willing to accept what is true in everything you perceive, you let it be true for you. If you perceive truly, you are canceling out misperceptions in yourself and in others simultaneously. This is what forgiveness is. This is what happens with miracles. Because you see them as they are, you offer them your acceptance of their truth so they can accept it for themselves. This is the healing that the miracle induces. So this last paragraph in this section is the description of forgiveness, right? It's just like, what do we do? How do we correct our distortions? We practice the means given is the practice of true forgiveness. We withdraw our belief and our investment in illusions, and we place all our focus and investment in truth, in God, in the light. And that's what we do. That's what we do while we are moving through our workbook lessons. He says he's laid out, this is why I say this is a spiritual technology, a systematic approach to undoing the ego and actually clearing all the distortions in our mind. Jesus has moved through it. He's done it. And now he is our demonstration. He is our brother. He is our guide. And he's such a beautiful teacher. I just want to say thank you, Jesus, for your teaching, right? For your teaching tonight and everything that you're bringing us, because it's having us get into deeper connection with him. Hold his hand. He is taking us along. He's been through this. He knows. He sees all. And he knows, most importantly, he knows your innocence fully and wholly, right? That is what we have to remember and learn. Okay, so thank you so much for the deep listening, the connection, just going on that journey with me through those two sections of chapter 3. Thank you, Jesus, again for your guidance. And my recommendation as we come to the end of these classes is now, when you have some space, go back and read section 1 and 2 of chapter 3. And I'm going to be sending out the recording. This will eventually be on YouTube. Listen to it. Let it wash through your mind again. It's very, very helpful to let it, again, this was the self-care, the soul care. He's like, let these thoughts wash over your mind. Let my words wash over your mind. I will help waken you, right, from the dream of separation. Okay, if you are interested in deepening your connection with A Course in Miracles, if you want support, go to our website, www.modernmiracles.com. We are here, hearts open, arms open to you to come and join with us, okay? There's so many options for your support. Sending you tons of love. And again, thank you so much for your presence today.